I just think we're just going to jump right into the Russell Wilson news because I think it's just so interesting. And what he did here, I mean, he basically, him and his team, he listed out 4 teams that he'd like to go to if a trade was going to happen. Now, he didn't call for a trade yet. He didn't pull a Deshaun Watson yet. Deshaun Watson, I think at this point he would have to change his mind to come back to play with the Texans. I don't think that's the same thing with the Seahawks and Russell Wilson yet, but it's definitely getting there. And now you pose the question is, who are the teams he wants to get traded to? And when that happens, when you have a trade list made out, that's never really a good sign that things are going to get better. I mean, usually things get worse from there because why would a player be plotting out teams he'd want to go to if he didn't want to leave? And that's something that I think we all have to kind of think about in that, look, I mean, you don't just create lists of teams you'd want to go to just for fun. You do it for a reason. And to me, this is a very interesting reason for Russell Wilson because you'd think he would stay in Seattle for the rest of his career. But look, they haven't really built around him at all. I mean, they've really drafted poorly, and they haven't added an offensive line. Their defense has been shoddy since the Legion of Boom. And yes, you can let Russ cook, and he'll have amazing stats and all that stuff, but if you can't build around him, you'll never get back to that championship, and that's obviously something they want to do. So, again, that is a really interesting situation in Seattle, but then you bring it to the Saints, and the Saints are one of the 4 teams he may want to go to, which is something that is really great. I mean, obviously gives the Saints some leverage if they were ever going to be in trade talks with Russell Wilson. I think at this point, you're definitely calling Seattle to see what the offer would be. And Russell Wilson's just, look, he's a top 3 QB in my mind, and he's a guy, generational talent. And you look at his contract, and the Saints would only, I think, owe him $19 million this season, and they could, I believe they can kind of change the cap and do what they do with the restructuring and bring that down to 7 or something like that number. So Russell Wilson's an affordable player, and he's a top 5 QB in the league, and he's 32, right in the middle of his prime. You probably at this point see 6 to 8 more years of him just the way QBs play. And if he's a Saint for 6 to 8 years with this team, and we're going to talk about what you'd give up, but you're really liking the Saints' chance to go to a Super Bowl if you bring in that type of QB that reminds me of Drew Brees in his prime. I mean, he really does. I mean, the way he can push the ball downfield, very, very accurate. I mean, you look at what Russell was able to do with not that much talent around him, no real running game, kind of reminds you of those Drew Brees teams when they went 7-9. I know the last 2 years the Seahawks have been very good, but I mean, still, I mean, Russell is that good of a player, and you bring him in here and you just extended your window for years to come, especially if you can keep this core together. And when you look at Russell Wilson's salary, that's something that you could do. And if you can only get him for $19 million, now I'm assuming he'll want an extension, but then you can just backload that extension. We know the Saints are great at that, so it could probably even keep their window open in the short term and really open, or maybe they'll just not extend him for a year or two, and then you kind of wait a little bit because then you probably would have to give up a lot here to get Wilson. You may sacrifice 1 year. If you get Russell Wilson and give away guys like Marshawn Lattimore or a Ryan Ramczyk or whatever it may be, it may hurt you for 2021, and you may not win, but who knows? I mean, you actually may because you have that better QB. I mean, that is definitely an improvement from old Brees, 42-year-old Brees, to 32-year-old Russell Wilson. It's definitely an improvement, and right now, that's something, if you're the Saints, you definitely have to look at. And when you look at your other QB plans with Jameis Winston, whoever, Taysom Hill, whoever it may be, it's just really interesting because, again, it's nothing against Jameis, but, I mean, you're taking the known factor, the known top 3 QB in Russell Wilson. Now, maybe Jameis grows into that or grows into a top 10 QB or whatever he grows into. We don't know that yet. We don't know that where that potential is. What we do know is Russell Wilson's a top 3 QB right now, probably for the next 6 to 8 years. And that's something you could you can't let that go. And that's something that if you're the Saints, you have to inquire about. You have to throw your best offer at. And look, I've been on other shows saying that I'd give the house to get Deshaun Watson, but I was like, oh, the Saints would never get Deshaun Watson because they weren't he wasn't the teams. Now you have Russell Wilson, and the Saints are one of those teams. So I'm obviously going to say you give the house for Russell Wilson. You definitely give your best offer. 3 first-round picks, I think that's for sure. I think then you add on top of that, probably it's going to be a guy on the offensive line. I mean, supposedly it's maybe Eric McCoy. I know Brian Bieniemy said that on Twitter, they may be looking for interior offensive line, so that's something maybe to look at as well, because, again, that's something that would be interesting. I mean, they definitely want to beef up that offensive line for Russell Wilson, but if you trade him, would they still want him? Would they want Ramczyk? Probably. Lattimore's another guy that they can get a lockdown corner to go with Jamal Adams, make that secondary kind of like the Legion of Boom. And if you're the Saints, I mean, I'd be fine with giving up 3 firsts and Lattimore, and if they want to add an offensive lineman, maybe a Pete type or maybe a McCoy type, I'd actually be. It's hard. It's hard to give up that much, but I'd probably do it. Looking at Russell Wilson's contract, I mean, the Saints would be at a disadvantage at the cornerback position. But look, we just saw the Bucs with. We've been talking about all last season how the Bucs did not have the secondary to win, and it was a huge weak spot, and they need to get it better. And look, those players, once the playoffs came around, they played just good enough. There are no stars there in that cornerback group, but they played good enough. Sean Murphy-Bunting had a really good postseason, and you were right there. And you won the Super Bowl. So you don't need maybe that shutdown corner. I mean, just looking at the years past, I mean, the Chiefs didn't have a shutdown corner. The Eagles really didn't have a shutdown corner when they won. And, I mean, the Patriots, they had Gilmore, so they really the only one. So, again, you don't really need that shutdown corner when you have a Russell Wilson, when you have a Patrick Mahomes type, have that Bucs offense and Brady. Like, you may not need, and just that amazing front seven from that, what all those teams are really putting up. Like, the Eagles had an amazing front seven when they won the Super Bowl, and they did a great job with the front seven. Same with the Bucs. I mean, and they can kind of help that back end because you get a lot of pressure. And maybe the Saints do something similar there, but then you wouldn't have the first round picks to add on the defensive line. It's all very interesting, but again, I'd give up the 3 first rounders and a Lattimore, and probably not a Ramczyk at that point. I'd probably give up someone less, probably more of a Pete or maybe a McCoy or maybe a Ruiz.